mum's house and I don't know anything at that point. And then my children come, my sister-in-law was there, and I don't notice anything. And then I start to talk to my boys. My eldest son goes into the kitchen and my mum gets angry, and then my daughter comes in, and then I knew something was up. I go, "What's wrong with you?" She goes, "Nothing." I go, "But what's up with you?" I thought it was one of her children who had a problem. She goes, "Mum, it's Karim. He's gone." "What's happened to him?" She says to me, "He's gone." I go, "He's dead?" She says he's gone to Syria. He had phoned his brother, telling him that he had entered the land of Sham and that he didn't want to come back here, that he didn't belong here anymore in this country. I heard this word, Syria, Syria, and I felt the world fall on top of me. I didn't see it coming. I haven't done my job as a mother properly. I didn't get to kiss him, tell him that I loved him, that he was everything to me.
Well, I've come backstage now and I'm with the director, Nicholas Kent, and the writer, Gillian Slovo. Gillian Slovo, what was it that made you think this is something that you wanted to be involved with as a writer?
Because I'm a writer who likes to write about how the world is, and I like to explore political subjects. And when Nick came to me with the idea that we should tackle Islamic State, although it was quite frightening in the sense that it is such a broad subject, there was a lot to get hold of. I also thought I'd really like to do it because I want to know more, and if I want to know more, I think an audience wants to know more.
Gillian's idea that if she's interested in it, then other people would be too. Presumably the motivation for you was similar.
Yes, it was absolutely similar. One really wanted to know what it was that caused people to go. Was it the same as the Spanish Civil War, where young people went because they were ideologues? Or was it that something to do with religion? Or was it to do with racism? All those questions came up.
Gillian, when you were researching it, it's sold as a verbatim play, but the research involved what for you initially?
The research period was a period of intensive interviewing of all sorts of different people, of police, anti-radicalizers, academics, historians. The reason it's verbatim is that every word in the play is actually taken from one of these interviews. I interviewed in all about 45 people and then sat down with the transcripts to think about who best could tell the story.
The core of the piece, in terms of it, the emotional core of the piece, is the three mothers. Did you travel to Molenbeek in Belgium to speak to these women?
We did. We had a very good researcher who found us this mothers group in Molenbeek. Molenbeek is now infamous because it is the site of many of the jihadis who did the Paris attacks and who then did the Brussels attacks. But this was before then, and we went to Brussels, to Molenbeek, to interview this group of mothers who had come together both to give each other support and also to try and warn other parents about what could happen and to see the signs. So we interviewed about 7 women who spoke really from the heart, and it was quite clear from the very beginning that would be the emotional heart of the play.
And Nick, there is a very poignant postscript to this piece with the mother Yasmin. Tell us about that.
When I started rehearsing, I took 3 of the actors who were playing the mothers to Brussels to meet the characters they were playing, and that was a very moving meeting. But there were only 2 of the mothers there. They told us that the third mother, Yasmin, she's called in the play, had actually heard just before Christmas that her son had been involved in the Paris attacks and had blown himself up away from the Stade de France, about 500 meters away. And she was devastated by that, quite obviously. She didn't even know he'd come back to Europe. And she'd withdrawn from this group of mothers who were trying to warn other mothers about the perils of their children going off to Syria. All the children that went from all the mothers that we talked to had actually deceived their parents.
I've certainly spoken to mothers who have lost their children to the so-called Islamic State group, and one of the things that really struck me with one particular mother, she said, ISIS used love as a tool. And that really came through with the mother whose daughter had chosen to go because she'd fallen in love. And I suppose for me, walking away from the play, it just made me think about how it's easy to forget that beyond the victims of those people's actions are people who have loved these individuals.
Yes, and I think also it's very easy to try and point the finger of blame when a kid goes, there must be something wrong in the family. And one of the things that was so clear when we were talking to these mothers is that it isn't necessarily anything that they have done. In particular, in the case of those kids from Brussels, it's quite clear that racism and the children's feelings that they cannot have a place in the society of their birth is what drove them to mistakenly believe that they could have a stake in a better place there. But also, I think what really impacts on me, and in particular since I've known that Yasmin's son had a suicide vest and went to Paris, is that she is the one actually who blames herself even before this happens, who says, I didn't do my job as a mother properly, because he wouldn't have gone if he had been happy here. And the fact, I weep for her that she blames herself for the fact that her son wasn't happy, and somehow takes the responsibility for something that is much bigger than her and is not necessarily anything to do with what she has done.
The writer Gillian Slovo, and I was also talking to director Nicholas Kent about Another World, why young people join the so-called Islamic State. That's it for this edition of NewsHour. I'll be back again tomorrow. Thanks for your company today. I hope you'll join me again then. Bye-bye.
This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM, New York. Just keep listening.
First of all, it's great to be home. This is home. We love New York.
God bless the great state of New York.
I am the very proud United States Senator from Vermont. But I am very proud that I was born here in New York City, that my wife was born in Brooklyn, New York.
I'll tell you what, it is a thrill to be live at the Apollo with all of you. It is wonderful to be back home in New York. It is.
And we are very excited about heading to New York, where I've learned not to eat pizza with a fork.
Well, even Ted Cruz praised New York at some point over the last 2 weeks there, or at least asked God to bless us, whatever that means in this case. God bless the New York Value Sinners. But with that, happy Primary Day, everyone. And for most of the Brian Lehrer Show today, it's our informal, unofficial, thoroughly unscientific New York primary exit poll. Who are you voting for your party's nomination for president? 212-433-WNYC, 433-9692. We can also take your calls if you're voting in the special elections to replace Dean Skelos and Sheldon Silver in the now two less corrupt officials New York State Legislature. But primarily for president, the primarily Democrat or Republican. Let us know who you voted for or will vote for later today, and we'll ask you a few exit poll style questions along the way. 212-433-WNYC, 433-9692 for our informal, unofficial, thoroughly unscientific New York primary exit poll. Who are you voting for? Who did you vote for? Who will you vote for your party's nomination for president, Democrat or Republican? You can also call with any election site questions or problems or stories. Help us report how this day is going out there. If there's anything worth reporting from your experience voting or what you've seen as you went to vote, 212-433-9692. And as Election Day is finally upon us, we can also reflect on the campaign fever that has captured New York City and New York State. It's been so exciting and passion-stirring for New Yorkers whose votes never mean anything in the primaries or the general election in most years, because the New York State results are either too late in primary season or a foregone conclusion in the November elections. And so one thing I think we saw is that people became extra passionate as a result of the rarity of playing a meaningful role. On the Democratic side, I would say it's kind of sad, actually, that for two candidates who have very positive visions for the future of this country and a lot of positivity that they have both inspired people with over their careers and earlier this season, that so much is at stake in New York that the campaign narrowed over these 2 weeks into a focus on the worst things about each one. Clinton's coziness with the Goldman Sachs of the world, Sanders' lack of specific plans for breaking up the banks, her both sides' positions on fracking in Indian Point and some other things, his more conservative record on guns. They both spun it so it has become more who do you like least than who do you like best, compared to before the Battle of Brooklyn of the last 2 weeks. One thing Sanders voters should remember, I'll throw this in, is that the polls were wrong in Michigan. Polls have been wrong so many times this year, so don't give up just because the latest ones show Clinton with a lead. And Clinton voters, same thing. Don't take it for granted. Sanders is generating turnout that polls don't measure very well. Now, out west, he got 70%, even 80% of the total votes in some states. So Clinton voters, Sanders voters, none of you should take anything that you've seen in the media about polls in the last few days as definitive or determinative. On the Republican side, I'd say Donald Trump wisely held his rallies in the suburbs and upstate. He knows he's considered a racist and a fascist by so many in the city. He would draw as many protesters as supporters. Kasich was present, kind of anemic in New York, and Cruz didn't even try, right? Cruz might get 0 delegates here, that's possible. Kasich might pick up a few. Trump will get most or all if the polls are remotely in the ballpark. But remember, Republicans, delegates are allocated largely by congressional district on the Republican side. 3 delegates per congressional district. So Kasich has a chance in much of Manhattan, in much of the suburbs. So don't think your vote is wasted. Again, on either side of this, the Trump side or the Kasich side, in your particular congressional district, it could be very close. So it's our informal, unofficial, thoroughly unscientific New York primary exit poll. Who are you voting for your party's nomination for president? 212-433-WNYC, and we're 1 minute away from going to your calls. As they're coming in, here are some voters talking about why they care about this election at our WNYC traveling talk box on Staten Island.